it meant time that you weren't really doing anything, but I think that's kind of morbid. So I call it found time. Found time is any time that you find yourself reaching for distraction. So you sit down and you're like, I'm just going to take 5 minutes, and suddenly you're on YouTube for 2 hours. That is found time. You can use that to harness it for good.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Mullins, and I love to help women to vibe, to be more vibrant, intuitive, beautiful, and empowered in midlife. So come on, let's vibe. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the V.I.B.E Living Podcast. And today we're going to be talking about something that you might find a little bit curious, and that's the whole concept of homesteading. What it is when it comes to the whole midlife experience, and why you should even consider a homestead lifestyle, which may not be exactly what you think it is, but we're going to kind of peel back the layers and talk about it with Elizabeth Bruckner, who is the author of The Homesteader Mindset. It's a book that will transform the way you view self-sufficiency, and especially taking a look at self-sufficiency as we head towards midlife, or in my case, I don't even know if I'm in midlife anymore. I'm 68. I don't know what you call this. I call this my third act. That's what I call it. Elizabeth, welcome to the V.I.B.E Living Podcast. It's wonderful to have you here today.
Thanks for having me, Linus. It's wonderful to be here. And I have to say, you are thriving at 68.
Well, thank you. I'm trying. No, I'm not trying. I am doing that. I'm setting the intention to thrive at
Yes.
68. I'm setting that intention. So tell us a little bit about you, Elizabeth, and this whole homesteading thing, how you came to be so enthusiastic about the idea of a homesteading or a homesteader mindset.
Well, I'm an acupuncturist by trade, so I have a master's degree in acupuncture and oriental medicine. And I treated a lot of patients at my clinic and would see that they were really getting better quite quickly. However, when I would give them things to take home, especially my midlife patients, when I'd give them things to do to take home, the patient compliance was rather low. It was like they wanted to come in and get fixed, but they really didn't have time for self-care. So that was in the back of my mind as I then became a language learner in my 40s, just for sheer pleasure. It was, for me, my midlife awakening, because I was like, I'm going to do this. It has nothing to do with my career or success or helping family. I just want to learn French because I've always wanted to learn this language. And so when I started learning French, I learned how to learn things, and I learned how to create systems. And there were things that I didn't even know were possible. Fast forward to 2020, when I went to the grocery store, and like many of us, I noticed that the shelves were empty, and it made me very nervous. There was no organic garlic, no organic ginger, which was very important for traditional Chinese medicine. Those are two very important herbs. And I came home and I told my husband, I'm feeling really anxious about this. And he said, well, why don't we start growing our own food? And I was like, honey, what are you talking about? Like, I was at this point, I was late 40s and was just learning how to cook. I mean, I had thought that busy people aren't supposed to cook. We're supposed to outsource our food and all of these things. So I had always been outsourcing these things, even outsourcing my self-care. And yet I knew in my heart of hearts that the prescription to anxiety is oftentimes action. So I thought, okay, well, I'll try. I will go out to the garden store and see. And as I started looking into fermentation, which increases the vitamin content of your food, it preserves it if you don't have electricity. If there's a blackout in California, sometimes there's earthquakes, so that could happen. I also started just searching for people to teach me online and through books. And the word that kept coming up was homesteading. And I thought, well, that couldn't possibly be me. I have cement in my backyard, surrounded by a pool. There's lots of sidewalks and telephone poles. Like, I live in the suburbs, a very densely populated suburbs. Like, obviously homesteading is for people that make their own clothes and, fight off bears with rifles, and like, they don't have electricity. That's the farthest thing from what I thought homesteading was. However, homesteading is this modern call to action. It's this new intentional way of life. It's this life choice that people are starting to take that kind of harkens back to our traditional skills, the traditional skills of our ancestors, our grandparents. I don't know about your grandparents, but my grandmother knew how to raise a chicken and, call that chicken and then make a soup with it, and knew how to raise these are things that seem so far away, but they're not. And what I learned is that she was connecting to her own innate resourcefulness. And yet, although I had done so academically, I had done so in business, I didn't connect my resourcefulness to actually providing for myself and my family and like being connected to food. I remember the first time I saw broccoli come out of the garden. And, again, this was my late 40s. I didn't know what it was going to look like. I'm like, so that's what broccoli looks like. That, I think, is the sign of a broken system. That's the sign of us kind of giving away our power for so very long. And so I think a lot of people in their midlife are actually starting to harken back to gravitating towards their true power, their empowerment, their abilities, and learning new skills that aren't quite that hard. They're actually way more, they're easier than they are then let's see, the payoff is much higher. So the satisfaction that you get from being able to make food or create nutrient dense food or gut microbiome dense food, all of these things are essential. Now, my book talks about three different types of people: young, working poor, living in an urban area. That's what I was in my 20s. So I harken back to that. And then in the suburbs, a married couple with two kids, and then a retired couple. And so it shows you how you can do homesteading at every juncture of you can make that decision at any time in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, your 50s, your 70s. And there's no one that cannot do it. There's not someone that's disabled and unable. There are ways to create homesteading every part of your life. There's ways to harken back to that innate resourcefulness for all of us.
I love all of that. Now, for people who do not know exactly, or they may have some preconceived notions of what it is, and it could be incorrect. What is homesteading, and who is a homesteader? Who's your average homesteader?
That's a great question. So first, I want to talk about what traditional homesteading was. Like, where do we get that word? Back in 1862, the federal government started a number of acts one of them was called the Homesteading Act, and it would often the federal government granted 270 million acres of land to private owners. Now, a lot of the rich got richer, but there were a few homesteaders that would get the 40 acres and a mule or more land, and they would go out, build themselves a cabin from the wood on their ground, start eating the food that they could find and hunt, and they became homesteaders. So that idea that I had in my mind of fighting off bears with rifles and having a pitchfork and making your own clothes, that actually was existing back in the 1800s. Now, modern homesteading is a mindful way of living. So it has many spokes of the wheel. Your idea of homesteading, or your version, if you decide to start homesteading, will be very different than my version of homesteading. Some people consider it's their first homesteading spoke of the wheel that they choose is raising hens to have eggs in their backyard. I don't have a yard that will be big enough for eggs, but I have neighbors that I'm actually talking to now about sharing their backyard and raising eggs. What I can focus on here is fermenting. So I do a lot of fermenting vegetables, fermenting dairy. There's actually some kefir that's behind me that I just taught someone how to make this morning. And now I have one and she has one that's like a yogurt kind of a
Which is
culture.
perfect, especially for the midlife. And I kind of want to talk about that a little bit in terms of, we talked about midlife, we talked about homesteading for the retired couple, but someone kind of like in between that. Homesteading for the woman, over 40 on their way to 50, thinking about retirement on the way to 60 and figuring out how they can maybe cut back some things and also be healthy at the same time. How does homesteading fit into all of that homesteading lifestyle?
Well, I would say firstly, and I'm sure you know this as well, that particular phase of life is very tricky, right? We're starting to help our parents as they age. We're still raising kids. We probably still have a job. We might still have a mortgage. We're not free and clear. It's not like everything's easy at this point. Your kids can be left home alone for a little while, but you still have a lot of responsibilities. So one of the biggest issues that I see when I talk to patients or when I talk to readers that want to start homesteading is the three big myths. I don't have time, I don't have money, and it's too complicated. I want to talk specifically to those in midlife about I don't have time, because there's a lot of time that we have that we don't realize. realize. In language learning, I learned that the way that you can harness time is to use what they call dead time. It meant time that you weren't really doing anything, but I think that's kind of morbid. So I call it found time. Found time is any time that you find yourself reaching for distraction. So you sit down and you're like, I'm just going to take 5 minutes, and suddenly you're on YouTube for 2 hours. That is found time. You can use that to harness it for good. Now, in terms of midlife, what are we looking for? Well, a lot of times we're having serious issues with hormone imbalances. And in acupuncture, just a plug for acupuncture for those that are listening, it does amazing jobs with insomnia that are based on hormone problems, migraines that are based on hormones, any kind of hormone imbalances, night hot flashes. Acupuncture is fantastic. So if you're anywhere in the United States, there's an acupuncturist near you. Ask them if they can help you with those hormone imbalances. But what I found is when I started doing gut health as well, when I started having the probiotic foods, that I was doing it for health, but I didn't realize that it would start limiting some of the hormone imbalances that I had. And the way that I noticed this, because I'm on a Eastern medicine background, so I don't do a lot of the tests I usually look on symptom based. How are my symptoms going? I had a lot of extra hair growth, and the hair growth stopped when my gut health became better. My insomnia went away. I didn't even know I had insomnia, but I started sleeping like a rock. Like as soon as I close my eyes, I go to sleep. And that was not the case with my bad gut microbiome. And this was a byproduct of homesteading. So the reason I was doing it was for more health, to be more of service to my family, to take care of my body, and also have some sort of intentional way of living. I feel like I don't know about others, but for me in my 20s, I was running towards something, always running towards something. And then my 30s, it was like, okay, I'm kind of still running. And then 40s, I was like, what am I running for? This is ridiculous. And I started going, I need to find out where the goodness is, where my feet are planted right here. And homesteading allows you to do that. So you can decide, like while we're talking and I'm saying something, perhaps it's sourdough, making sourdough. I don't do sourdough. I have a great baker at the farmer's market that makes 48-hour fermented sourdough. I don't need it. So I don't focus on that. I focus on where my feet are and what's available for me. I can have a little plot. I have blackberries growing in my driveway because there's a lot of cement, but there's not a lot, that's a good place to put some gigantic containers. And then I can feed my family with food that I know where it came from.
Yes, that's really one of the wonderful things about growing your own food. But I know that homestead is so much more than just growing your home food. It's a lifestyle, it's a way of being. How does it help in terms of your mental health?
I think that homesteading is quite remarkable for mental health. There are a number of studies that talk about how any type of hobby that you use your hands with will create happier people. So if you're, even if it's like you're whittling or you're crocheting, or in the terms of homesteading, a lot of the projects are using your body. Even if you're just creating a compost garden, you are getting your hands dirty, you're using your hands. That's going to increase the serotonin and dopamine levels in your body. Whenever you move your body, you're regulating your moods. And also in terms of I talked about before, anxiety, depression, even post-traumatic stress disorder. Some of my patients, they will find that they just get green therapy by going outside. When we're talking about anxiety and depression, there a lot of times comes with depression feelings of hopelessness. And one of the prescriptions for hopelessness is gratitude. And what better way can you be grateful than to see how much abundance you have? And I'll tell you, this is an example of what I mean by abundance. I take cabbage that cost me, $3 at the farmer's market. I put some salt and water. I just put some salt in it and I let it sit for a day. Then I put it in a jar and I start fermenting it, which means it just sits in it and it eats itself. The bacteria, the lactobacillica, eats the cabbage and breaks it down. I let it sit that way for 7 days to a month. And what I've created is something that you buy in the store with that one head of cabbage, probably about $50 to $60 worth of food. Whereas if I went to the store and got the real deal sauerkraut, not the vinegar, but salt water, those things are like $16 for 8 ounces. So
Wow.
I've created abundance here. And I think that in midlife, we're looking for that stability and we've got to find a way to find it. And so I don't know what better way to have great mental health, glowing mental health, aside from having gratitude, but having your hands on the things that you are creating, noticing how abundant nature truly is.
I love that. And you're absolutely right. There is also a really form of self-satisfaction when you're able to create something from your own hands.
Mhm.
And it also, you're using a different part of your brain set than you would normally do. I am I don't know what I am now. I do so many different things in my business. I have so many different streams of income, but one of them definitely does involve creativity.
Yeah.
And about 6 years ago, I think it was, yeah, it was right around my 62nd or 63rd birthday. I was looking for something else to do with my brand. I felt like there was more messages I wanted to send, and through a series of things, I ended up coming up with the V.I.B.E brand, and the idea of being more vibrant, intuitive, beautiful, and empowered. And that came from my going on a walk and hearing this intuition telling me that I need to go to the store and get some gel pens and an adult
Mm.
coloring book. And I'm like, what? I said, okay. So I did, and therein began this whole new metamorphosis of doing adult coloring. And it was really fun. I really got into it. By the time I was moved on to something else, I had like 500 gel pens. I mean, I was just really into it. But what happened is that it unlocked some
Mhm.
other things, and I was able to develop the V.I.B.E brand and some other things that came with it. But the main thing that was most interesting was the sense of joy I felt just by creating
Mhm.
from my own hands. And when I hear listening to you talk about homesteading, a lot of it has to do with things that you do yourself for yourself
Yes.
instead of purchasing it someone else or asking, someone else to do it for you. When I was growing up, my mom was a great seamstress. And because back then, because my mom, if she was still alive, she'd be in her 90s, and all women knew how to sew.
Mhm.
Having a sewing machine in your home was like having a TV. And I remember when my parents bought me my first sewing machine, and I did learn how to sew and all that. Of course, I've let that go. But as I'm listening to you, I said, I should pick that back up again,
Mhm.
because sometimes the things I want to wear at this stage of life, I cannot find at the store. But as I'm listening to you, I thought, oh, I could probably make that. Didn't even think about it. So even as you begin talking about it, it begins to free up your mind in terms of ideas of ways that you might want to homestead.
Yes, actually, in acupuncture, we talk about the element of wood, and wood is all about creativity. And think about a tree. Like, let's say a tree is growing up next to a house with an awning, right? If the
Mm-hmm.
tree hits the awning, it doesn't stop growing, it grows around it. Like, it
Mm-hmm.
very much wants to move and course. And so, a lot of times in our medicine, we'll have people with stagnant wood. They'll come in and they're frustrated and they're angry at life, and it's coming out in symptoms. And I tell them to do something creative. Of course, I give them some acupuncture points too, and that gets the flow going. And just like you said, you went, first of all, you were walking. So you were building neurons as you were walking. And then the inspiration came and you followed that inspiration. It's kind of a, I think the key here, which not a lot of people in midlife are often connecting, is you start with self-care. Like walking is an act of self-care. I remember myself, I think in my 40s, I was like, I'm going to learn about time management. I just don't, I'm pretty organized, but I just wasn't getting enough done. And so I read all these books about time management. And in the end, what I learned is that it wasn't about time management that I was having the problem. The problem was I was not making self care a priority. And self care can be something amazing. The fact that you decided you were going to do the gel pens and the coloring then led to a podcast. And this is probably your secret. That is why you're just really thriving at 68. Like, surprisingly, for those of you that are not watching, you'd be knocked over if you saw her and would think, what are you doing? Because you look fantastic. But I think that that's because you're constantly growing, you're constantly practicing self-care. And
Yeah.
what I was missing, and I think a lot of women are missing in midlife, is everyone needs me. And what I will say is, if you don't do self-care, you will not be there for everyone that needs you. So if you really have a responsibility to your family, to your community, that the very first responsibility starts with self-care, moving your body, finding something. And I always recommend just doing some daydreaming. What did you hear? Like, oh, I would love to have some eggs in my backyard, but it's absolutely impossible. I live in a city, or, my kid's dog would eat them. Well, then just start daydreaming about what is important about that. What does it look like for you? For me, it would be sitting on my lawn chair and having little hens clucking around me. That sounds fantastic. Me, my husband, some of my family members. Then you start from there and start to decide what you're going to do. Maybe it's just you're listening to a podcast on how to raise hens, or maybe you're listening to a podcast or reading about cooperative growing and like how you can approach someone in your neighborhood, get to know them, and then create a community that maybe has the hens that you want. I'm using hens as an example, but it could be sourdough, it could be sewing, right?
No, I,
Crocheting
I,
is
I love
fantastic.
I love what you're saying because it
Mhm.
just occurred to me something else.
Yeah.
Homesteading can be a form of relieving chronic stress.
Yes.
Because when you're chronically stressed, first of all, it's horrible for everything. And we haven't really gotten to the gut yet, but we're getting ready to go to the gut right now. Because of course, when you have an unhealthy gut, then that vagus nerve is taking to the brain all this unhealthy blood flow that you have managed to put together through the digestive process, but it's just not healthy. And then you add to it your lifestyle that is stressful, and you're waking up in the morning with brain fog. You're setting things up over time to have chronic disease. But if you were to shift a little bit and begin looking for opportunities to homestead, to create something, it kind of gives you something else to focus on, to free up space, because chronic stress takes up a lot of space. And your body,
Yes.
your mind, your spirit takes a lot of space. But homesteading, if I'm not right, could it possibly be a way to deal with chronic stress?
Absolutely. I think anytime you are attempting to use the spiritual for medicine, you can affect the emotional and the physical. And so for me, I find homesteading like this is, I'm coming from, I did not have a mom that knew how to sew. I was a latchkey kid. Both my parents were working. We ate lots of microwave food. Like it was pretty sad in terms of the household, but my parents were hard workers. However, I'm learning to slow down. I'm learning to do these things that I never thought possible and reconnect. And what I find is that it is some of my favorite moments. Those are some of my favorite moments of the day. Is when, I mean, first of all, I don't know about the dishes because when you cook, there's a lot that I would not say the dishes are my favorite part, but I usually habit stack. So when I'm washing dishes, I'm listening to something
Right, you're
that's
doing
going to,
something. Yes.
yes, that's going to inspire me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So
beautiful.
yeah,
That,
that there's a groundedness. I mean, even doing these things barefoot or in your socks, just to kind of help you stay more connected. Like we are human beings living on this earth. We are a part of nature, although we forget that. We're not separate from it. So every time that we're getting our hands working on something or we're creating a dress that we really like, or we're even for me, I love like creating rosemary salt. Like I saw it at the farmer's market. I'm like, how do you do that? I have rosemary in my garden. I have salt. How do
yeah,
I do
me
that?
too. How do you do that? I
Oh my
haven't.
gosh. It's so easy. You take rosemary from your garden, you just clean it thoroughly, dry it a little bit. Not drying it like an herb, you can, but I like it fresh. And you just rip it off, throw it in a food processor with salt and then a little bit of lemon rind.
Mhm,
Like you kind of use the zest from the lemon rind. You
mhm,
grind that up, maybe a little bit of sage if you have some sage in your garden.
mhm. And that too. Yep. Mhm.
Yep, you do those and then you put it I'll see if I can find the recipe and send it to you. Then
Okay.
you put it in a mason jar and keep it in your fridge. And then you just throw some of that in a little jar and bring it every time you're invited to dinner, right? Who doesn't love? I mean, first of all, the smell is amazing.
It
And then
is
you can use
amazing. Yeah.
yeah. And it
Yeah, I like
takes
the
five
idea of my
minutes.
refrigerator smelling like that. I love rosemary. We have bushes and bushes of rosemary. It's kind of out of control. And bushes of sage and bushes of lavender. And we're like, okay, what are we gonna do with all this stuff?
Yeah,
So
there's a
with the
lot of fun stuff.
lavender, we made oils. We made essential oils. I guess that was a form
Oh,
of homesteading now that I think about it. And
absolutely.
with the rosemary, he created some rose. My husband did for his turkey. Every year we make turkeys for people for during the holidays and stuff. And he uses the rosemary and sage and some other things. That's kind of where the idea came to grow it because he used to buy it and we started growing it. So wow, we were doing homesteading and didn't even know it. So
You
maybe
did it.
I am an accidental homesteader. Right?
See that? You certainly are. Congratulations.
What about that? What about that? It's interesting because as I'm listening to you and I'm thinking of all kinds of ways that I already am and could be more, my
Mhm.
thought would be, what are the three things that can really turn a person into more of a homesteader mindset?
The three things that could turn someone into a homesteader mindset, that would be firstly, recognizing that you have choosing a life of vibrancy and play. Like saying, I'm going to enjoy this life because we only have one precious life that we know of, right? We our time is limited here. Do we want to be a workhorse? And I grew up around workhorses and I was a workhorse for many years. Do we want to have just complete drudgery? Let me tell you, the people that are workhorses are not often that fun to be around because they're always in the task. The next is learning for pleasure. Like when you say at 62, you decided to start doing something creative and new, right? There's a lot of people that are 62 think that it's the end of the line. They're just going to
No, I
do.
have a lot of those friends like that.
And
Yeah.
it's so sad because their stories are always the same. And what happens with their neuroplasticity is your body will start believing you. If you tell your body, I'm old, I'm tired, and nothing's going to change, you will be old, tired, and nothing will change. But if you're moving your body, if you're deciding, like even right now, your synapses are going, oh, wow, making essential oil with lavender is homesteading. Oh, I
Right.
wonder what I could do. These are new, your body, your brain is doing all these fantastic new connections, which keep you more vibrant. And then lastly, finding joy and making it fun is really important. So when I look to homesteading, and I did this with language learning as well, and I talk a lot about this in the book, you're not going to do it the way that you're doing it or I'm doing it, right? Not how the host is doing it, not how I'm doing it. You're going to figure out what works for you. For example, I'm not really interested in making a sourdough bread and putting those little, flower prints on them and making it all pretty and I have no desire for that. But that might float someone else's boat. So I'm looking for what makes me happy. And if
Wow.
I just happen to, I think it might be my Belarusian heritage. Like, I don't know what it's going on, but I love fermented food. My grandparents
Well,
liked
it
fermented
certainly
food.
is really good for your gut. I'm
Yeah.
telling you, I happen to be one of my expertise is gut health. And
Really?
I'm always looking for ways to show people that achieving gut health does not have to be that difficult. In fact, you can turn around your gut health in 14 days because your
Yes.
body wants to serve you, just like the universe wants to serve you. You just have to tap the right resources. And when
Yes.
you were talking about the cabbage, I was thinking to myself, oh, I got a head of cabbage in my refrigerator right now. This might be a good time to try that. Sometimes it's all about the idea of trying it and
Hmm.
see what resonates with you. Same thing as, trying to find a movement regime. That sometimes is a challenge for women over 50, over 60, because maybe they never exercised before. And it's so funny. You may not have ever exercised before, but during this time of your life, you definitely have to move. There's just no doubt
Yes.
about it. So how do you find something that resonates with you, that brings you joy, that you have fun doing, so that you'll keep doing it? But you'll never know until you try. It's like buying a pair of shoes. Very rarely is that first pair of shoes you try on like, oh, I love it. Or you say you love it, you pick it up, you buy it, and after a couple of days, you're taking it back because it didn't really fit that great. Well, sometimes that's the same thing in midlife when you're trying new things. The whole idea is to give it a try and
Hmm.
keep trying until you find the thing that resonates with you.
Yes, and find the things that really float your boat. Like if you happen to be a highly social person, like you're very extroverted, you do really well in groups, then that's a good idea that you want to do something that's in a class base or a group. Like they recently had at the farmers market, they had knit in public day, and there was a bunch of people knitting, and I just ran over with my crochet. I had just given a talk on kefir, and I ran over afterwards and just sat with people just to kind of be in my community and find my people, find the people that resonate with me. There's another foundation called the Weston A. Price Foundation, and they're all about scientifically based healthy food from traditional backgrounds. So it was this dentist that went around the world and looked at people's teeth and noticed that the aboriginals or the indigenous people of that area that were not eating processed foods, their teeth were amazing. And then as soon as a generation or two of them using processed foods, it just went downhill. So I've
Like,
got
isn't that
some
interesting?
since
Yeah.
you love gut health, I've got two things I want to tell you because I can nerd out with you all day. Firstly, kefir, which you probably know, but maybe your listeners don't, it actually eats candida for lunch. So
Mm.
kefir grains
Which
love candida.
which is so important because one thing that I learned when I turned 60 is that there seems to be an increase in candida. And
Yes.
women all of a sudden at 62 and 63 feel like they're in college because they're getting these yeast infections.
Yep.
And, they're not doing what they used to do in college to cause the yeast infection. So what's going on? And it's the increase of candida that has a
Yes.
tendency to happen as we age.
Hmm.
It's interesting because we're talking about neuroplasticity and
Yeah.
homesteading and how they're all interrelated.
Hmm.
When I left corporate America at the age of 51, I didn't know exactly what it was I wanted to do, but I knew that I wanted to help women over 40 to heal because I was sick, not physically. Physically, I was great, but emotionally, I was suffering
Hmm.
from an anxiety disorder. And the answer immediately was to take some kind of pharmaceutical. And I
Hmm.
inherently knew that that was not something that I wanted to do. So I took a sabbatical. I worked for a healthcare organization. So I took a year off under the auspices of getting my second master's, of which I did not do. I went and did something else completely different. And when it was time for me to go back, I called my boss and I said, you know what? I'm not coming back. Pack up my office and send it to me, because why would I go back to one of the things that caused me to have that anxiety disorder? So at the age of 51, I learned what it is I do now. I thought I was going to teach dance because I am certified to teach ballet. But that was, I did do that, but that's when I found out that women over 40, 50, 60 and beyond, they needed so much more than just dance. A lot of emotional unwellness and a lot of trauma and just things that happen in life. Not that they
Mhm.
were problem children or anything like that. It wasn't that. It's just life
Mhm.
happens. And
Mhm.
sometimes we need help in processing that so we can keep moving forward. So as I was coming up with things to do, I started teaching myself. And since that time, I've been doing podcasting for 15 years. But prior to that, I had to learn social media. I knew nothing about social media. I was so excited when I found out about Facebook in 2008. My kids were like, what? We've already been on there. Now I think about that. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what were they doing on there that I didn't even know about? I didn't even know that I should have been concerned back there that they knew
Mhm.
it and I didn't. I was totally
Mhm.
naive.
Mhm.
But I acted on intuitively that there was something there that I was supposed to be doing. And
Mhm.
sometimes that's what might could lead you to something that you would enjoy doing from a homestead perspective, is that intuitively it just feels comfortable, even though you don't know what the Sam Hill you're doing. I had to let go of my ego because, of course, I was going to make mistakes and do things. But now, 18 years later, I have over 200,000 followers on the internet. I've built
Wow.
websites, I've done magazines, all online. Everything I've done has been online, whereas before I knew nothing about it. So there
Mhm.
is something to the idea of trying something from a homestead perspective, I would imagine, that resonates. It makes you go, maybe I should try that. I just want listeners, vibers out there, I just want you to stop being afraid of doing something different than what you're used to. Right,
Yeah.
Elizabeth?
Yes, absolutely. And I love this idea of you keep talking, you've said twice that you were inspired and that you worked on that inspiration. I think that when we go from being able to have children and our bodies are here to help produce human beings and help those human beings thrive, then we hit midlife. And midlife, our creativity doesn't stop. Our ability to create does not stop. And I believe that our inspiration becomes stronger. We just need to stop and listen to it. And I think that
Oh, I
you
love
are
that.
offering that to people.
Yeah, I love that. It's funny too, because I have four inspirations. I have four daughters and I have seven grandchildren. And
Oh.
it's so funny because people who knew me in college, they just can't believe I even have one, because I just was not oriented at all to the
Mhm.
idea of kids, family, or any of that. But when I got pregnant with my first daughter, I, I intuitively knew that I wanted her to have siblings because I didn't want
Mhm.
her to be an only child. I wasn't an only child. I had two sisters. And I don't know why I felt that, but it was the only thing I felt strongly about when I found out that I was pregnant. The rest of it, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. But I did do that. And what happened was, three more human beings, which I would have never known about. If I had not had that first one, I would have never had any children. So
Mhm.
sometimes things happen in life that give you that aha moment. And then right after that aha moment is, and what about this? And
Mhm.
it's that, and what about this? That I really want to inspire all of you
Mhm.
vibers out there to actually go ahead and do it instead of just thinking about it. I hope that none of you become masters in, the remote control.
Yes.
Really let that go. There's
Mhm.
so many other things you could do. As you were talking, I thought about
Mhm.
another homestead thing.
Tell me.
Well, my granddaughter's visiting me
Mhm.
for a month.
Ooh.
And I've been thinking about different things I can do with her that will be memory makers for her, that are
Mm.
very like Nana type of things to do. Well, I have some rose bushes that are growing outside my window, and some of the flowers are beginning to burn. And I see some new buds that are going. I know I need to trim them back, haven't done it. Usually my husband does it. But I thought, you know what? I'm going to get my shears and I'm going to do it. And I'm going to take her with me and we're going to learn together how to do it. And she's
Yeah.
going to pick the good ones and arrange them in a vase and put them in my office. And that will be something we can look forward to doing around the property, because we have rose bushes all over the property that we need to trim. But I hadn't even thought about that as a
Mhm.
learning experience for her, but as a form of homesteading, because we got all this stuff. But I will go to the farmer's market or to the grocery store sometimes and buy what's right. It's right there, burning up.
Begging to be brought into the house. Please, it's
Exactly.
hot out here.
So
Yeah.
is that what being a homesteader is kind of all about?
Yes, it's about mindfulness. It's about community. It's about reconnecting with our family, our friends. I think that we have been given a disservice when we have concrete driveways and two-car garages because you go right into them and you don't really get to see your neighbors. And then you come right inside and your community becomes, just like you were saying, the remote control. The community becomes whatever show you're watching. And that's not community. The TV cannot love you back. Yeah. And the phone and the device, right? Yep. And so I think when
Absolutely.
we're homesteading, like for me, when I'm out watering my grass and my not my grass, when I'm out watering my plants, I'm usually barefoot with feet in the ground and I'm giving myself time that when my neighbors stop by, they're going to stop by and talk and tell me how they're doing. And I'm again just connecting, being, and then when I was language learning, oh my gosh, my poor neighbors that spoke Spanish, I would constantly victimize them with my beginner Spanish. It's like,
Here she
well,
comes again.
that's right. You were warned. I told you I was learning. And you just create these incredible human connections. And it's better. It gives you more love and acceptance and, as you had mentioned before, satisfaction just to be with your granddaughter, as opposed, yes, in the evening, you guys might watch a movie together, get some popcorn, fine. But what an incredible moment to be sitting quietly together, teaching her how to prune a bush because people don't know. You can do it wrong and like showing up for each other and then having some physical product that's made from your time together. And these are memories that will continue to grow. That is the beauty of the creativity that continues in our bodies even past midlife.
Absolutely. I just love it. Everybody, The Homesteader Mindset. It's a book that will truly transform the way you view self sufficiency, give you tools and practical tips for a more meaningful life. Elizabeth, thank you so much for sharing bits and pieces of yourself today. It's been wonderful having you here on the podcast.
Linus, it was a pleasure. Thank you for sharing your time with me.
Thank you. And thank you to all of you. I really appreciate the fact that you all have been listening. I can see in the stats because we are now in the top 5% of podcasts in the world, which is still like mind blowing. Of course,
Wow.
now there's 3 million podcasts out there, but still, I'm going
Listen,
for the 5%. I think that's
yeah.
great. So please continue to listen and take a look at the other podcasts that are there. There are 136 episodes that are on this particular site. So please go ahead and check them out. They are wonderful. Comment, like, and share. And I'd love to hear from you. Get your opinion on the podcast and other kinds of things that you would like to hear about that are going to help you to vibe, be more vibrant, intuitive, beautiful, and empowered in midlife. Thanks so much, everybody, for listening. Have a fantastic day. And don't forget to vibe. Bye bye, everybody. Thanks for listening to the V.I.B.E Living Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment, and share this podcast. Have a fantastic day, and don't forget to vibe. Bye-bye, everybody.